So box.
Hi, my name is Rochelle, and you're listening or watching to Box F1 Pod. Today we are going to be debriefing the Spanish Grand Prix, which was kind of popping, but also like not at all. Anyways, we'll get into everything that went down on track, which was still quite a lot. But first, it's time for the digital warm-up. Lap 1 off the grid. So this is taking it back to Monaco, but there was a clip of Max and Fernando after the post-race press conference. While Esteban was trying to answer a question, they're both like looking between each other and like pointing to their wrists and like discussing something in like intense whispers. And then Max was like, could we hurry up? We're gonna miss the start of the Indy 500. So I thought it was very funny. Fernando's always trying to hurry those things up, but they were both so antsy to get back and watch the Indy 500 that they were like, we don't have time for this, which was kind of sad for Esteban because it was his first time, but still. Anyway, speaking of Esteban, he posted on TikTok that he celebrated after the Grand Prix by going to McDonald's with his friends, which is like the least glamorous thing ever, but it reminded me of several years ago, I used to work at a restaurant that was in a hotel where the Seahawks, which is, if anyone doesn't know, it's the American football team in Seattle, they used to stay there before a game, and the opposing team would stay at the hotel across the street. But when the Seahawks would arrive, they'd walk through our restaurant to get anywhere. And every time I was the hostess, so I kept trying to like get them to sit down, be like, hi, do you want a table? We've got steak. And they'd all, without fail, go, nah, we're going to Wendy's. That's what this reminded me of. Another thing that happened last week in Monaco was Guenther went a little cray-cray. And so last week in Monaco, Guenther, I think, was a little salty about Nico's penalty and said during an interview after the race that every professional sport has got professionals being referees and stuff like this. It's like F1 is one of the biggest sports in the world, and we still have laymen deciding on the fate of people that invest millions in their careers. And in case that's not like clear to everyone, the stews are volunteers, not like inexperienced volunteers or like uneducated volunteers, but they're still volunteers. It's not their permanent job all year round to be stews. But anyway, Guenther got called into the principal's office. Stu was not happy. And this week in Spain, he had to go see them. And after the meeting, Guenther released a public apology saying that there was a misunderstanding and that when he had used the term layman, what he had meant was that this wasn't their permanent job. And that it was misinterpreted, and he would never imply that there was a lack of professionalism or a lack of knowledge within the steward's room. And it seems like the stews took that explanation at face value, which sounds like a little kind of like bullshit. Too long didn't read. Guenther told the stews that he used the term layman to indicate that they don't do it as a full-time job, rather than to imply they didn't have professionalism or the expertise to do this, which apparently worked. Moving on. The Pitstop Boys released a new song, and for anyone who doesn't know, the Pitstop Boys are the ones who did Max, Super Max. Sorry. And then they are also the ones who did the Lando song, which I don't remember how that goes. Oh, Lando's one of us. He races like a lion. Na. And now they've released a Fernando song. Naturally. The song is called Vamos Fernando. And it goes like this.
Fernando Alonso is back. Fernando Alonso, fighting his way back on track.
Okay. You got it. It's jam. I actually think it might be my favorite. I really need to know, are the Pitstop Boys just a bunch of like old Dutch men that sit around and wait for inspiration to strike about a random driver? Are they retired? Do they have other jobs? I just need to know their backstory. Do they do anything in the music industry, or is it just this? Anyway, moving on. Lando has finally shaved. There was a clip posted of Lando and Oscar walking together, and Oscar goes, "You look about 10 years younger," and Lando goes, "Ooh, couldn't shave it off my belly, so I had to get it off my face." Talking about weight. I laughed. Speaking of Lando, someone commented or messaged me about a clip from a couple episodes back where I talked about Lando's cologne habits. And they basically contacted me to let me know that they actually went to the store and tested it out with all 3 of the colognes, and they said it wasn't that bad. I can't imagine how that's possible, but now I feel like I must conduct my own investigation. So I think during the next 2 weeks that we're off, I am going to go to Nordstrom's and test out Lando's cologne combo, see what it's all about. Can't imagine it works. Can't. Just I can't. Okay, also, okay, so the funniest photo to come from the Spanish Grand Prix is a picture of Yuki meeting the basketball player Kristaps Porzingis. I definitely pronounced it wrong. He's a basketball player. It's funny because Yuki is 5'3" and Kristaps is 7'3". It's like truly the most hilarious picture I've ever seen, and it reminds me of that picture of Shaq and his girlfriend. If you have not seen it, you must look it up. The height difference is the same, although of course Yuki and Kristaps don't have like logistical issues in the same way that Shaq and his girlfriend had, or that I imagined would happen in that situation. But same. It is like common. Like it's almost shocking to believe it's only a 2 feet difference. Yuki is tiny. However, his neck much thicker than Kristaps. In fact, that might be the whole like girth of Kristaps' body. Anyway, last thing is Albon posted today. So after the race, he posted an Instagram reel of him partnering with Cerave, the skincare brand. And he did like a get ready with me video where the caption is, "Wearing my Cerave moisturizer with SPF equals happy girlfriend and protected skin. Sun, peace." #ad. The video is like of him washing his face, and then he like applies some product in his hand, rubs it around, and then just like face palms himself and just like spreads it around like this. Obviously not absorbing. It's like a thick layer of moisturizer. And then it like cuts to him like texting. He's like, POV, texting my girlfriend, "Thanks for the reminder." Alex is so underrated. I say this every week, but every week he gives me a new reason to say it. Like, he is unbeatable when it comes to like his social presence. It is so good. It is so funny. I hope he does so many more ads after this. It was hilarious. All right, lap 2. Spanish Grand Prix race week moments leading up to the weekend. There was a hilarious picture taken on the day of qualifying, which I know now because Charles is wearing his red pants. And he's walking with Esteban George, I think. I can't remember the third person. I'll have to double check. But they're walking and Esteban clearly tells him something because Charles gives him a look. Sorry, I was corrected. I'm supposed to be saying Charles. Charles gives him a look like he has just received the juiciest piece of gossip possible. It's like oh my god. Like, I can't even read it. He just looks... The face is that of like the best feeling in the world when you get a piece of information that's just so good, you know? That's the look on Charles's face. I will find the picture. It is great. Also, speaking of Esteban again, he's been on a roll. During the press conferences before the race, Max was being asked something. He like did like some sort of water ski activity with Red Bull, and he was being asked about it, and Esteban interrupts, and he's like, "Is that why you look so tired or so pale or something?" And Max goes, "No, that's probably still from Sunday night." Funny. I love also that in the same press conference, Max was asked about Dr. Helmut Marko, and his response every time he's asked about something Dr. Marko has said in the media is always like, he's gotten a bit overexcited. And everyone in general just seems to kind of roll their eyes at everything Dr. Marco says, because Nick was asked if he was relieved that Helmut said that the performance they saw in Monaco from Nick is what they like to see, which Dr. Marco said in the media. And Nick was like, you're the third journalist to ask me that. And just like said a bunch of word vomit that basically amounted to, I don't give a flying fuck what Dr. Marco says. Continuing on press conference, Lando was asked if it was great to see the car come alive in Monaco, to which he responded and said, car or driver, which has been his go-to joke the entire time, because I really don't think he thinks that the McLaren should be getting any credit in anything that's happening. He's like, it was definitely me. It had nothing to do with the car. The car sucks. Stop giving it credit. Also, this was after the race, but Toto was asked if Lewis was going to be re-signing with Mercedes and how close we were to that. And he said that all that needs to be done was to sit down for a cup of coffee, 30 minutes, and we're done. That was yesterday. They could have easily had the cup of coffee today. We won't know probably till later. But, I mean, I don't think he's leaving. He's not going to Ferrari. Like, more specifically about the Spanish Grand Prix and our two Spanish boys, Carlos and Fernando in and around Spanish stuff was just so cute the entire weekend. I loved them during the national anthem, where they sort of stood arm in arm and listened silently to the piano player play the national anthem. And it was just so wholesome, and it reminded me of that King of Spain episode in Drive to Survive, where they've like, it's like the whole evolution, like we've circled back and they've like decided to share the crown. And I just love them. I love how great Fernando's become. I wish I had seen him in his like petty evil drama days, but like I love this version where we still get the sass and the pettiness, but like he's still really nice, you know? Side note, did anyone notice both Carlos and Fernando gave a very like warm and affectionate hug to the Grand Marshal? Does anyone know who the Grand Marshal was and like why they hugged him so hard? Like, I'm assuming he's in the motorsport world from Spain, so naturally, but like still, it was very like intimate of a hug for just a guy they know from motorsport, you know? Anyway, moving on to celebrities. And there were actually quite a few in Spain. I was impressed. You know who was not there, though, was James Marsden. So my theory of him probably only, like, rocking up to the big ones is probably going to be true. But we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe he just couldn't make this one. Shakira was there watching the race. I wonder who she was there to support. First of all, girl loves an athlete. Second of all, Lewis loves a singer. Third of all, I think she's a good luck charm, you know. I don't remember how he did in Miami. I need to check. But, like, she worked here. She did great stuff here. Anyway, also there were Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas, who I've spoken about more in the last, like, month than I ever thought I would talk about them. But my favorite part about them, so Brundle stopped them in the middle of his, like, track walk. And, you know how celebs usually act around Martin Brundle? And this is where you know that they are, like, actual F1 fans, which she actually mentioned later on. She said she's been watching since she was a kid. I don't know if Michael Douglas watched before her, but, like, he's clearly gotten into it. They're like, it's a whole family thing. We all sit down together to watch every weekend, and they, like, love it. But, like, the first thing that when Martin Brundle stops them, Michael Douglas goes, I just need to interrupt you for a second. We are such fans of everything you do, like, what you bring to the sport, what you bring to the grid walk. Like, it was just, like, if I were Martin Brundle, I'd be, like, fanning myself that Michael Douglas was paying me so many compliments. And then Catherine Zeta-Jones backed him up. Martin Brundle is so awkward. Like, I love Martin Brundle. I respect this entire grid walk situation, but he is very awkward. Like, his transition from he's a great commentator. He's great at all this F1 stuff, but, like, his, like, human interaction skills are a bit ako-tako. Like, they're, like, waxing poetic about F1 and, like, about him and, like, all this stuff. And then he goes, so, what you doing for work? Michael Douglas is on a break right now. Guess after Ant-Man, everyone needs a break. That was quite something. Catherine Zeta-Jones, however, we found out is starting to shoot Wednesday in the fall, which is very exciting. Yay. Also, it was like a football paradise this weekend. Mbappe was there. Neymar was there again. That's 2 weeks in a row. And he did a funny video where he like interviewed-ish like Guan Yu and the Ferrari boys. He might have done other people, but those are the only ones I saw, where he had them recreate car noises, and it was low-key hilarious. I think it was Guan Yu that just went, It was funny. I don't know why he was doing that. If it was just like for fun for himself or what. Anyway. Also there was Ben Chilwell, who is a Chelsea player, and Mason Mount, who I adore. He is so cute. I don't know why he was there. He did give well, I do know why he was there. He likes F1. He is a Red Bull fan, and he's also good friends with Lando. And he's just so cute and wholesome in his little beige cardigan. He gave the Pirelli tire award, which that one's weird. I don't know why he gave the pole position Pirelli mini tire thing, but he did. And he was just hanging with his little smile and his little cardigan. I love Mason Mount. All right. Moving on, lap 3 paddock fits. Okay, so there was nothing like this weekend to really write home about, but there are a couple of shout-outs. Guan Yu wore a cool Dior jacket. Lewis had like a neon green pants and shirt set. Again, he had like 5 sets, but like this is the one that stood out for me because it looked like a highlighter. Esteban tried. He wore like a more slim version of Justin Timberlake's like all denim look from the VMAs, I think it was, from like the 2000s, where he went with Britney Spears. I did not enjoy this at all. It was too blue, too weirdly denim, like almost fashion, but it was so slimmed down that it looked weird. Like it was like Uniqlo, or like not Uniqlo. I don't want to insult Uniqlo. I like Uniqlo, but like it was just like a weird outfit. Not a fan, but A for effort. Love that he tried. My another great fashion moment that happened was that Carlos had a bucket hat with chilies on. It was like a white bucket hat with a bunch of chili peppers on it, and he just like did not take it off. And like honestly, it's a necessary item. Like Carlos needs to own this bucket hat. Lewis hated it, and he thought it was hilarious. He like was doing a media pen interview, and he was asked something, or he just randomly brought up, he's like, I'm sorry, have you seen the bucket hat that Carlos is wearing? It is the ugliest thing. Here, I took a picture. And he has like a picture of Carlos in this bucket hat. And there's a theory going around, I don't know if it's true, but like when they were doing press conferences and at the end of the race, he was showing Max something on his phone. And everyone's convinced that he was showing him the Carlos photo with the bucket hat. But I just find it so funny that he thought it was so ugly that he needed to take a picture of it to laugh. Final fashion moment. This was my top fashion moment of the weekend. So Martin is doing his little grid walk, and he's like, who else could we find? Who else can we find? And he just sees a man on the track. By the way, walked right by Calvin Harris. Pretty sure Bridgerton guy. Oh, not a Bridgerton guy. He walked by an Emily in Paris guy. And he stops this random man, and he's like, so who are you? Again, the awkwardness and diving into a conversation. He's like, who are you? And the guy was like, oh, no, I'm nobody. I'm not famous. This is just like a great outfit. It was a good outfit. He didn't look like a celebrity in it, but like, I just loved that response. I'm nobody. This is just a really good outfit. Anyways, by the way, that guy said he was there with a Bridgerton actor. And does anyone know who he was there with? His name was like Arlo. I fully made that up. I don't think his name was Arlo, but he was there with a Bridgerton actor, and I want to know which one. Anyway, with that, we conclude the digital warm-up. On to the race rhyme. The rain in Spain stays mainly in George's visor. TBD on George's sweaty face. We've got a race to decipher. The Spanish GP was a chance for a King of Spain to finally take the throne, and Carlos's P2 in quali gave us hope that Ferrari might be in the zone. Ferrari was so not in the zone. Exhibit A, Charles was out in Q1. Ferrari wasn't sure why, so they changed all the car parts and were like, yup, that should get the job done. Also in quali, Pierre finished P4 but got a 6-grid penalty for impeding. And Lewis and George had contact, but it didn't stop either from proceeding. Our top 3 are Max, Carlos, and Nando. Hold up, no. P3 is none other than Lando. So when the lights go out and away they went, Carlos gives it a go, but Max has already gone full send. Right behind them, Lando was not so lucky. Contact with Lewis sent him from P3 to P20, which is so sucky. At one point, George is like, the rain has come. And Christian sticks out his hand like, huh? All I see are clouds and sun? But then George is like, lol, JK, that's not rain, that's just my sweat. Does that just make George a high-performance athlete? You bet. Remember at one point we thought Ferrari might be in the zone? Lol, nope. They lose Carlos's podium spot and Charles' status, unknown. Also, Aston Martin manages only P6 and P7 today. On the bright side, they've got some superb teamwork on display. Max is so bored, like 20 seconds ahead of the pack. He's doing all sorts of wild stuff, exceeding track limits, setting the fastest lap, until his engineer is like, oh my god, enough. Like, we all want Max to be challenged, but how do we get ourselves a P1 spar? I think the CTA is obvious. CC all other teams, change your fucking car. By the way, you'll never believe who did change their fucking car. Lewis and George bring home a double podium, like the superstars they are. I guess some upgrades don't lie and we're starting to feel you boys. The pods and suspension. Don't you see, Merc is almost perfection. Up next is Canada, land of Poutine, Justin Bieber, and Lance Stroll. Fingers crossed that Merc and Aston and Red Bull will be going toe to toe. Okay, on to analysis. So I was a bit meh about this race. Like, I know a lot of people were excited because it was like a multiple stop strategy, and at the end there was like 107 overtakes, which Will Buxton just kept repeating over and over again. And like all of these things should make a race exciting in theory, but like it didn't. It didn't feel like any of that like happened actually. But it also wasn't like a boring race by any means. It was definitely not a boring race by any means. Plenty happened. But before we get into like the full analysis, I want to do a mini track walk and go through some of the changes at the Circuit Barcelona Catalunya. The chicane that everyone sort of seemed to hate has been returned to its former layout, which is a double right-hand corner. Only Fernando has had experience racing on this layout. Lewis has had experience testing on the layout, but he has not had experience racing on it, although that did not stop Lewis from like expressing his like insane excitement about this change. I guess no one liked the chicane, although Lando was like, I don't know why we're doing this. So I guess it's mixed, but non-racers were excited about the lack of chicane as well. Also, there were like major rain predictions that had been floating around, and it did kind of look cloudy, but no one in F1 knows how to predict weather. So I like take everything with a grain of salt. If they say it's going to rain, probably not going to rain. But yes, there was a threat of rain hanging over the race, and the way that manifested is like absolutely hilarious, but I'll get into George later on. Okay, so before fully we get into quali, there was a quick moment from practice that I have to mention. Max was on the radio, and somehow he like is attuned to the entire background. Like, it wasn't just noise. He could tell what was going on, and he randomly just goes, is that someone's phone going off? Is it helmets? And his engineer sounds like he's like chuckling a little bit, and he's like, yeah, it is. And then Max starts to laugh a little, and the commentators just like lose it. But also, it's just like so funny how insane Max's hearing is. Because like, remember that one race? I don't remember when it was specific. Last year? Maybe it was 2 years ago. I think it was last year. Max knew that Ferrari was pitting because he heard the sound of the wheel gun in the background of his radio. That is wild hearing. That is like, he's listening hard to hear that. Anyways, Max's like supersonic hearing aside, moving into qualifying, at the very beginning of Q1, there's a red flag because Fernando ran wide into the gravel trap and like massacred his floor. So he was basically like fucked up for the rest of qualifying. His car was duct taped together. But also the car just seemed to be lacking pace in Spain in general for some reason, in a way that we haven't seen it do before. Fernando did still make it to Q3. He qualified 8th, but excitingly, Lance Stroll qualified. Lance, what other Lance is there? Lance Stroll qualified P5. Love to see this for Lance. He's been getting such a hard time because he did so well when his wrists were broken, and then he's kind of had meh races ever since. Everyone's like, see, we knew he sucked. But like, I almost feel that like the adrenaline right after surgery might be easier to compete with than when you're going through like that horrible throbbing ache as it's healing, you know? Like, I really think that the results we've seen from him have to do with his recovery. Like, people forget that he had like crushed his wrists just like a couple months ago. That's not like the speediest recovery. Anyway, happy for him that he finally can be like, fuck you guys. Anyway, there was a tragedy in Q1 besides the gravel trap. Charles was out. And as Charles is driving into the garage, he gets on the radio and is like, we're out, right? And Javi responds with, we are, like, immediately. To which Charles just goes, unbelievable. To which I say, the only unbelievable thing about this entire situation is that Ferrari knew the answer without needing to check. Like, that confidence, though, about knowing stuff did not carry through into fixing the issue. Charles said he was not the problem and that he would be shocked if there was nothing wrong with the car. Ferrari, for their part, either couldn't figure it out or just decided not to bother and to just send it back off to Maranello for further testing. So they just replaced the gearbox and like a bunch of other parts, which meant that Charles was starting from the pit lane. He qualified 19th. And Logan Sargent qualified 20th, but Logan also ended up starting from the pit lane, so they were both in the pit lane. Last thing on Charles, though, he was seen going to the medical center after qualifying, and everyone started freaking out. They're like, what's wrong with Charles? Is he dying? But turns out it was a routine anti-doping test, and he said he was fine. But the funniest tweet that I saw about the like whole situation was basically like, when you do so well in qualifying, they have to check you for cheating. Poor Charles. Poor Charles. Anyways, Carlos, on the other hand, had a great day. On average, they either have like, whenever someone has a really bad day, the other person has a really good day, or vice versa, or they both just have like a neutrally shitty day. Like, it's never like they both have a catastrophic day or they both have a spectacular day. Ferrari can't really spread themselves in that way. Anyway, speaking of Carlos's great day, he qualified P2 at home. Speaking of Carlos's experience in qualifying, Pierre qualified P4. However, he got a 6 grid penalty, which knocked him down to P10. I can do math. He lost 3 spots for impeding Carlos, which the FIA decided that Pierre did know Carlos was there, but that also Pierre struggled to get out of the way because they were both going so fast, and therefore Pierre couldn't help but block Carlos, but like apparently he could help it a little because FIA is like, oh, you didn't try hard enough, even though they just said that he couldn't. Anyway, after that he lost 3 more spots for impeding Max, and that one seemed to be the fault of the team for not communicating to him that Max was on a fast lap. The funniest part about this though was that as it happened, as like Pierre was in the way of Max, Fernando gets on his radio and goes, big impeding on the Alpine on the outlap for Verstappen. Massive one. I mean, into turn 4. That will be 3 places. I love that Fernando, week in and week out, is playing every single position available in the paddock. Like, he is engineer, he is driver, he is mechanic. Remember when he was like wheeling the wheels out? He is Stu now. Bro's done it all. Next thing you know, he's gonna be in hospitality cooking up a meal. Anyways, Fernando did not have we were talking about Fernando, but I forgot to mention that The commentators sometimes have great one-liners that I just like struggle to imagine they can even come up with on the spot, but they obviously do because they can't like predict this. They probably plan the Taylor Swift stuff, but this is like on the spot. As Fernando's like trudging along, the commentator goes, he's getting the ovation, but he's not getting the acceleration, which it's a good rhyme. That would probably take me like 10 minutes to come up with. So good job, Brundle / Crofty. Sometimes I can tell them apart, sometimes I can't. The only other incident of note is that Lewis and George collided, but kept going. And this was super wild for people because Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton had an infamous crash in Barcelona where they took each other out. And I saw a funny tweet where someone was like, if I had a cent for every time Mercedes crashed into each other in Barcelona, I'd have 2 cents. It's not a lot, but it's still bizarre. Luckily George and Lewis are on better terms than Lewis and Nico were, so it's like fine. They were both like whatever. Anyway, Lando ended up qualifying 3rd. He said during his post-qualifying interview that he had a few more tenths in him, but decided to give it to Carlos because it's his home race. How generous. I do like Lando's banter. He is funny. Anyway, super happy for Lando. Way less happy for Zach Brown, who, like, McLaren posted a video of Zach Brown, like, going around the garage, like, whooping and, like, high-fiving everyone and, like, bro-hugging them and just, like, broing out in general. And I'm just like, whatever. I wish Zach and Lando's fates weren't tied together. Unfortunately, they are. So if Lando wins, Zach wins. But also, when Zach's karma bites him in the ass, it also bites Lando in the ass. By the way, my Mason Mount, who I've already talked about, but love him, he gave out the pole position tire, which I still think is so bizarre. Like, I will take any excuse to see Mason with his cute little smile and his cute little cardigan, but that is so random. Don't they usually get like a local person to do it? Anyway, happy that he got to do it, but weird. There was like, he like gave Max the tire and they hugged, and then he saw Lando and he's like grinning and they hugged because he's really good friends with Lando, but he supports Max. I guess he's also friends with Max. But anyway, it's cute. So the starting grid for the race is as follows. Max in P1, followed by Carlos, Lando, Lewis, Stroll, Ocon, Nico, Alonso, Piastri, Gasly, because of the grid penalty, followed by Checo, George, Guan Yu, Nick, Yuki, Valtteri, Kevin, Albon, Charles, and Logan. All right, on to the race. This one's a speedy one today. The start of this race was probably the most chaotic moment of the entire thing. Max like surges ahead as Carlos tries and fails to overtake. But it was a valiant effort on his part. Like when one person is riding a bull and one person is riding a bright red turtle, what can the bright red turtle do besides try? Someone did ask Max why he tried so hard at the start, and he's like, what am I going to do? Just sit there? Like, why would I just like let Carlos go past? I'm going to try as hard as everyone else. Right at the start, Hamilton and Lando have contact. Lewis thinks Lando got over eager. Lando thinks that it wasn't his fault at all. Like, he was asked after the race, he's like, do you regret your move? And he was like, what move? Like, he was not phased. He was pissed off, but he didn't think it was his fault. It kind of seems that Max and Carlos slowed down, which made Lewis slow down, which didn't make Lando slow down, I guess. So, whatever. Regardless whose fault it is, there are flying end plates and limping McLarens, and it sent Lando in for a new wing, which relegates him back to 20th. Not back. He wasn't even out. He was P3, and he ends up in P20, which is so sad for him. So great for Zach. But so sad for Lando. I want him to thrive. I do. Side note, before the race, George was doing a lap and got stuck in the gravel, and Toto was like, it's okay, he's getting out, which made me laugh. And he did get out, but right at the start, George also like swerves way off track and was put under investigation for going off track and gaining an advantage. He was found innocent, but like it was touch and go for a moment, and like just like all in all, bad start for England. All right, moving on to Ferrari. I mean, like, nothing like overtly bad happened to Charles, but like also nothing great happened to Charles. the best way to sum up like the Charles experience is from his post-race interview, which when he gets asked, is it going to get worse before it gets better? Charles responds, how could it get worse? So sad. For his part, Carlos said, we know high-speed corners and race pace are our main weaknesses. But, like, what does that leave you with? You've got nothing left then. He didn't have great race pace, obviously, but his performance was definitely made worse by Ferrari. Like, for example, when he gets randomly told to box in lap 17, for example, Carlos literally goes, why? And they just ignore him. He just goes, okay. Like, the resignation in his voice. I can't. Similarly, Charles at one point gets told, box this lap for hard tires, to which Charles says, no, guys, let's go for the soft tires. And Ocon goes, understood. And Charles goes, so I come in? And Ocon goes, yes, come in, we'll go for hard tires. There's also, like, yet another video of Charles and Carlos speaking after the race in, like, hushed tones, looking like two broken men trying to find the meaning of life. And, like, can you blame them? Like, Ferrari literally said, understood, or copy to them, and then did the opposite of what Charles and Carlos said. No one is listening to them. They are the drivers. They have such a good team, and it's being wasted. Wasted. Like, even, like, Mercedes had a shit car, but they had a great team. They always had strategy that was on point. They always supported their drivers, always listened to their drivers-ish. Eventually. Lewis's suggestions on the car were not taken seriously at first. Anyway, we'll get into that later. But my point is, like, that's another example of, like, a solid team of drivers that are supported by their team, by the rest of the team, without necessarily having the best car. Ferrari has an incredible set of drivers, and their potential is just being wasted. Wasted. Fuck Ferrari. Fuck them. Anyway, let's move on to Aston Martin. So, like, in general, for some reason, Aston Martin lacked pace today. Everyone just assumes this is a one-off. I assume it's a one-off. Lance had some good overtakes, but eventually he fell to 6th, where Fernando was 7th right behind him. The most notable moment for Aston was towards the end of the race. Fernando got on the radio and asked for his engineer to let Lance know that he wasn't a threat to him, and he was driving so close to him to keep everyone else behind them at bay. Which everyone just, like, went nuts over. Like, why would he give up a potential position? They were fighting for 6th. Like, not a podium position. Like, they were going to have the same positions either way, or they would risk something going wrong just for the sake of Fernando finishing 6th and Lance finishing 7th. Like, I don't necessarily see this as a sacrifice. Like, Fernando's being like, oh, I'm so nice. Like, it just, like, it's good teamwork. It's good, smart teamwork. If they were fighting for a podium position, I think things would be way different. But 6th and 7th, Fernando's not dumb. Fernando did, however, say in the media pen that this would be the absolute last time this season that they would not finish on the podium. Those are bold claims, because then, assuming Checo doesn't continue to perform, that basically leaves one spot open. If it's Max and Aston Martin / Fernando, that leaves one spot open for other people. Anyway, on a funnier note that's not related to the race, Lance's post-race media was absolutely hilarious. One clip was of him, like, walking up to a journalist, and on the way he, like, hugged Esteban, you know, like the bro hug, though, like, yeah. And Lance comes up to the journalist after, and the guy was like, what was that about? And Lance just makes the funniest face, like, huh? I think that was a pretty good, huh? And the guy repeats the question, and Lance goes, we're friends? Anyway. And I think the next clip I saw was from the same interview. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure that it was a clip from the same interview. And I think that initial interaction really set the mood for Lance, and he was just over it. So the question the guy asks is, Alonso said during the race that he wasn't going to overtake you. And just stops talking. And Lance just stares at him like... and eventually just goes... And the guy, like, starts stammering a little, like, but, like, doesn't actually ask a question. And so Lance just goes, we were 6th and 7th. It's points for the team. And the guy was like, well, he's higher than you in the Drivers' Championship. And Lance just continues to stare at this man, like... And the guy was like, so I imagine it's better for him in the championship. And Lance was like... still like this disbelieving face that he's somehow involved in this conversation, and he just goes, he's right over there, like you can ask him. Like I was like, oh no, I've already talked to him. And Lance was like, okay. Honestly, his reactions to this man are so comical. Like it looks like he's doing like body and face comedy intentionally, but he's not. That's just the way his face works when he's faced with something he just can't fathom. Sassy Lance is my favorite Lance because he's still Canadian, but like when the sass comes out, so good. All right, moving on to Red Bull. So basically, we'll get Checo out of the way. I don't know what is going on with Checo, but it is frustrating to watch. Whether it's his, I haven't spent enough time thinking about it because I just haven't been interested enough. For some reason, I love Checo, but like I just haven't taken the time to figure out what's been going on there. But his performance has been abysmal lately. Checo, I like how I said that right before this next sentence, which is actually pretty impressive. But Checo fought his way from 11th to 4th, which was an impressive recovery drive. But like, is it just me, or have all of his drives recently been recovery drives? He can't continue just recovering all the time, you know? Also, last time Max started 11th, he finished 2nd. Anyways, he basically just like existed as an almost threat throughout the race. Well, except for Carlos, he actually was a threat to him and finished 1 place ahead. But he was also issued a warning to George for George to pick up the pace. Both of them got the warning at the same time, like, go, 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 go. But like, Checo never caught up to George. Tried, but didn't. Max, on the other hand, finished like 20 seconds ahead of Lewis, who was in 2nd. And like his big moment was at the start. Like his only moment of excitement was at the start when he had to defend against an attack from Carlos, which is why I get annoyed when people are like, well, why did you try? And he's like, what am I going to do? Not try? It's his only time to do anything. But like other than like defend his position, he basically just had to maintain his pace, which frankly he overdid. Like Max could have honestly stopped for a game of FIFA and like he still would have finished first. But like I feel like Max is so incredibly bored. Like the entire race, everyone was like, why is he trying so hard? But I'm like, it's because he's bored. Like he has nothing to do but like play against himself. He kept going, exceeding track limits, and he got a warning, and then he got a black and white flag for continuously going off the track. And he said after the race that it's sometimes hard to see on certain tracks where the limit is, which is fair enough. We all know that's true. But that is like a better excuse when you're like fighting for something, you know, like when you're being challenged, when it's hard. Max is just like cruising. Like he has to put in zero effort into this entire race. He has the brain space to focus on staying within the lines. But like at the same time, he didn't even notice when he had gone off the line. It's not like he was being careless. Like it truly is hard sometimes, like where they draw the white lines, it's like hard to keep track. Yeah, so, but anyway, every time he was told, like, you've exceeded again, he's like, what, where? Like, he was confused every single time. But someone joked that he was just daydreaming. Like, he just, like, was so in his own world because he was so bored, he didn't even notice. Then he got on the radio towards the end and was like, what's my lap time? And his engineer was like, oh my God, can you chill? Please don't worry about fastest lap. And Max was like, okay. And then proceeded to set the fastest lap. And his engineer, after he does the fastest lap, and his engineer gets on the radio so annoyed and just goes, "Okay, can you just bring it home now? within the white lines. And Max just goes, yeah. After the race, he was like, I know what my car still has the ability to do. I was warned. I got the track limit thing. I was careful. I could still set the fastest lap. I wasn't going to listen. He's like, I've laughed about it with Dr. Marco. We've all laughed about it. It's fine. Because he just kept getting asked, like, well, so why did you defy your engineer? Honestly, just like Max just has nothing better to do. Like, let him live. Obviously, this was extra entertaining because the stakes were lower. Like, when we see him, like, defying the engineer when the stakes are much higher and he's, like, racing against someone, it's way more stressful and, like, you feel much more frustrated on the engineer's behalf. But, like, in this case, whatever. Truly, though, nothing is as funny as when Max's engineer gets exasperated because Max just does whatever he wants. Like, the exasperation he exudes is hilarious. All right, moving on to Mercedes. So other than his moment with Lando at the beginning, Lewis had a relatively uneventful race. He drove super well. He maintained his position the entire time, and it was, like, great to see him thriving, but, like, nothing crazy happened to him. His radio at the end also was just so ecstatic. He just kept going, mega job, guys, a mega job. Of course, thanked everyone back at the factory. Classic. Toto even got on to congratulate him. So yay, Lewis. I'm actually really happy for him. George also had a great day. In my mind, arguably better, just in the sense of performance. So, like, in terms of actual performance, George went from P12 to P3, which is an incredible series of overtakes. At the very beginning, there was a moment he, like, went off track, and when he got back on, it looked like he had overtaken, like, 5 cars at once. So he was cited for potentially gaining an advantage by going off track. But then the students decided there was no investigation necessary. And from what I understand, he had completed all those overtakes without going off track. Obviously, otherwise they would have penalize him. George's shining moments today, other than, like, that, were on the radio. He had 3 radio moments that I absolutely loved. The first is a bit more subtle. So he gets on and says, a lot more pace in these tires. Need to look forward, not behind. Important to note, the person in front of him was Lewis. To me, it sounded like another one of George's sneaky attempts to, like, imply he should be ahead of Lewis. Obviously, nothing happened from that, but, like, it still made me lol at how George forms sentences on the radio. Seriously, it's giving Cousin Greg in court vibes. Like, the way he talks is, like, so intentionally polite, but there's clearly a double, like another meaning behind it. Anyway, the second message was when George overtook Carlos into P3 in, like, a pretty spectacular move. And his engineer gets on and goes, that was solid work. And George responds, just solid. And then suddenly Toto was there and he's like, it was pretty good. Hilarious exchange. Not sure pretty good is much better than solid job, but, like, dying at George joking, but, like, still, like, being like, that compliment is incorrect for what I did. Should be better. The third radio message that literally just, like, took me out was George getting on the radio and just going, it's starting to rain. Which at first I was like, here George goes again, like, being British, like, complaining about the rain, first in line to complain, which he did last week. But a few laps later, George gets back on the radio and he goes, is anyone else complaining about the rain? I think it might be sweat from the inside of my helmet. And his engineer goes, so it's just you reporting the rain? I suspect it might be the sweat. And I just, like, about died. It was so funny. It would have only happened to George, right? Like think of it. This situation is a George situation. He later explained he, like, didn't fully tuck his hair, like, all the way into his balaclava, so it was sticking out like that, like little, like, this, and, like, sweat beads were forming on the hair that was sticking out and just, like, trickling down. And only, like, when he went to wipe his visor did he realize that it wasn't wiping, so that the the water must be on the inside and not the outside. First of all, I can't believe he drove from P12 to P3 with like hair in his face and like sweat in his face and like condensation on the inside of the helmet. They can't pause and wipe it. Like, that is so annoying. Like, that's annoying for him and impressive that he was able to do something about it. But also, this triggered the most comical moment ever. The image of Christian literally sticking his hand out to check for rain took me out. I'm like obsessed. I'm obsessed that George mistaking his sweat for rain made everyone abandon their dumb rain radars and just like stick their hand out. Like, that they were like, well, clearly this is wrong, even though it's usually wrong. Like, we're just gonna check. Is there rain? There wasn't. Anyways, poor Georgie for inadvertently becoming a meme over and over and over again. He never tries, but poor boy just keeps doing it. Anyways, other highlights. So, Guan Yu and Yuki had been Guan Yu and Yuki had been like battling the entire race, basically. They were overtaking each other sporadically throughout. And they were basically on each other's tail the entire time. Towards the end of the race, however, Yuki was in the front. And basically, Guan Yu tried to overtake Yuki, but like Yuki was like, no. And to me, it looked like they almost touched, but basically Guan Yu was forced off track. He was pissed, said he was forced off track, and I guess the Stews agreed with him because they gave Yuki a 5-second penalty. Personally, I think it was a bit harsh. Like, Yuki was just defending in my eyes. Guan Yu probably shouldn't have attempted an overtake there, but like, oh well. Yuki said he's accepted it, so now so must I. I also love Guan Yu. I'm happy for him, but like, Yuki just can't catch a break. He's doing so well, but he can't catch a break. Other quick notes to make. Valtteri found floor damage after the race, which was so aggressive that like, it's amazing he even finished the race. And so everyone was saying how like Guan Yu's exceptional because he's like been like outperforming Valtteri. In this particular case, Valtteri had excessive floor damage. In general, though, there were a lot of great overtakes. They may not have resulted in much. A lot of them were like back and forth, and I think most of them were DRS. But it was still cool to see. Gasly had some great overtakes, as did Checo. He did make it from P11 to P4, which is a feat. And excitingly, there were no DNFs, which we always celebrate. Moving on to cool down podium. Cool down / podium. I'm gonna do this every time I have a slash. So a few moments from the post-race / cool down / podium were Nico Rosberg did the post-race interviews, which I don't know if this is the first time I'm seeing it or if it's actually the first time, but I feel like this is the first time on camera that Lewis and Nico are face-to-face and it's like all of their stuff. And that would be a fascinating deep dive episode, by the way. Like all about the Nico Lewis relationship. It's such a shame that Drive to Survive was not around at the time, and all we have is that one clip of them throwing stuff at each other. Anyways, I have to be respectful here. It's also been a long time. We all know Nico is petty AF. He brings up Lewis every second he gets. But Lewis has definitely matured and is definitely much more respectful. They were nice. They were pleasant. Didn't expect anything less. But I did love the final moment when Nico's like, okay, well, nice to see ya. And Lewis went, thanks. I don't know if that was an accident or not, if Lewis didn't hear him fully, but like, it still made me laugh. But also, like, Nico gives me such like evil, like James Bond environmental villain type vibes. I find it really hard to root for him. Like, I don't like him. I think it's his face. Sorry. But like, I'm glad they kept it respectful. Anyway, B, the cool down room. So I didn't fully hear the conversation. I pieced it together based on other interpretations and based on watching like 8,000 times. But basically, Lewis and Max seem to be making a joke and both like laugh together and then say George's name. And he's like, what? And from what I understand, they had been talking something about the champagne and the podium, not fully sure what specifically they were saying about it. And George didn't hear them either. And so they repeat something to him, and I guess he interprets it as like drinking in general, and he responds with, well, I'm staying the night, so like why not? And George and Max and Lewis start laughing again, and George is like, what? And they explain, and he's like, oh, right. Still don't entirely know what they said to begin with, but I love that George like just like on the spot agreed to go out with Max and Lewis. Can you imagine that night out? How can George sit there and think that's what they were suggesting and that he just agreed to it? If I were in that situation, personally, and I thought that that's what I heard, I would have come up with an excuse on the spot. I would have booked my private jet to fly me out that evening. It would have not... That seems like a nightmare. Anyways, I also love in the cool down room, Max without fail. He should really have a cool down podcast because all he wants to do is to discuss. Like, he's dying to chat. I loved seeing him try to chat with everyone. But, like, they are all, like, eager to participate. Like, it's not the cool down rooms of past that we've seen with Lewis and Max. They're friendly, they're bantering, they're laughing together, they're discussing the race in depth. And let's not forget, George and Max had their issue, like, a few weeks ago when they, like, yelled at each other around the podium. But here they are, laughing away, discussing the race, like, looking at George's overtakes, like, whoa, that's so good! And then... the best moment is when George tells them about the sweat thing and they all just burst out laughing. That was great. Another funny moment, this one is from the podium, is when George walks out. The photo behind him is his meme photo of him going like that. I'm not doing it well. But I thought it was a hilarious, and I hope this meme thing never dies. George can't live anything down. Everything he does is somehow so funny and memeable, and it just will haunt him for the rest of his life. And also, this is not like a moment, but I just loved watching them like do the post-anthem thing where they just like, sorry, I don't know what that movement was. They pop the champagne and they like spray each other, and they're all spraying each other, and they're all having a great time. They're laughing, and like it's such a stark contrast to the last time Lewis and Max were on the podium together, where they just like actively ignored each other. Like, it's wild. During the post-race conferences, there were a couple of great moments. One of the journalists starts a question by saying, "Question is for Lewis and Fernando." And they all look so confused. And George is like, "Fernando?" And the journalist is like, "Oh, no, Lewis and Max." And they all burst out laughing, and Lewis jokingly like looks behind the couch. And then Max is like, "Oh, is there something there?" Max is so cute. I love Max. And then the journalist tries to keep going and goes, "Lewis, you said you couldn't match the time with..." And then he clearly catches himself. And George goes, "Fernando." And everyone laughs again. This poor man just couldn't stop saying Fernando. Side note though, none of related to Fernando or anything, but how good does Lewis's skin look? Like, I need him to drop his skincare routine. I don't know if it's a vegan thing or the Still We Rise thing. What is making his skin look like that? Because he glows. I need to know. Anyway, Max is later in the press conference, Max is in the middle of answering a question, and Lewis, like, you can hear him mumbling something, and I think he's complaining about how bright it is in the room. I don't know if there's like a lot of windows or something. So he pulls out his sunglasses and just puts them on, and Max starts laughing and goes, "It looks good." And then, "Maybe next time we can come in with our helmets on." And George and Lewis both burst out laughing, and Max giggles. And I think my favorite part about Max is how proud he is when people laugh at his jokes. Like, his reaction is just like pride mixed with bashfulness and like giggliness, and it's just so funny. And after that moment, Lewis is answering a question, and then he pauses and goes, "I'm gonna keep my sunglasses on, it's so bright." And Max goes, "You're gonna become a meme now with the sunglasses when you said that, because you look so cool." I think Max knows he's not cool in the same way as Lewis, and I think he thinks Lewis is very cool. And when they're not competing with each other, like, you can just see that it would be a hilarious friendship. And like, it's so sad that like the Mercedes Red Bull relationship and like that whole thing in 2021 like ruined something that might have actually been so fun to watch. And I really wonder if there's ever been like someone two drivers competing so aggressively for a world title without their relationship taking a hit. Because it's sad. It's sad. But also, how can it not, you know? Never to that extent, though. I feel like, besides Nico and Lewis, but, like, I feel like the relationship between Red Bull and Mercedes really played a huge role in that. But it's just still sad. Anyway, all of this banter, the champagne pouring on each other, the, like, jokes in the podium and the cool down room. I don't know what's happening. I love it, but, like, it's wild. All right, moving on. Driver of the day. Officially, it is Lewis. And while he was good, I really think the driver of the day is George. He started P12. He finished P3. He had some awesome overtakes. He was clearly sweating, trying his best. Cue the Danny Rick clip of, like, the high-performance athlete. Sweat. Brr, brr, brr. I just think George really deserved it today. I also think driver of the day is friendship. I love to see George and Lewis and Max, like, hanging out and having a blast. Like, seriously, the motto for our top 3 today was live, love, laugh. That was, like, the epitome of them on Sunday. It was amazing. Dig in the box. Still Ferrari. Not much more to say there. All right, on to the results. The top 3 were Max, Lewis, and George, followed by Checo, Carlos, Lance, Fernando, Esteban, Guan Yu, Pierre, Charles, Yuki, Oscar, Nick, Nico, Alex, Lando, Kevin, Valtteri, and Logan. So the standings so far, we're 7 races in, I believe, since we skipped Imola. So the standings so far are Max with 170 points, Checo with 117, Fernando with 99, Lewis with 87, George with 65, Carlos with 58, Charles with 42, Stroll with 35, Ocon with 25, Gasly with 15. Those are the top 10. The rest are sad. The constructors are Red Bull with 287 points, Mercedes with 152, Aston with 134, pulling for them to come back next week, Ferrari with 100, Alpine with 40, McLaren with 17, Haas and Alpha with 8, AlphaTauri with 2, and Williams with 1. Thanks to Alex Albon. Anyway, so that's it for the Spanish Grand Prix. Next up is Canada in just a couple of weeks. I will be making poutine, I think, or eating poutine. I will be doing something with poutine unless you have a suggestion for another Canadian dish, and I'm happy to hear. As always, you can DM me or email me your thoughts, questions, suggestions, lessons. I love to hear all your box thoughts. And don't forget to follow at BoxBoxF1Pod on social to keep up in between races. So I'll see you in Canada, eh? Box.